We thought we were going to lose him, so we made funeral arrangements. My name is Carol Newman. I've been married for 40 years, and I have two children, Rhonda, who's 37, and my son Russell, who is 31. Russell is recovering from addiction to crystal methamphetamine or crystal meth. I heard about PAL over the local radio station, Christian radio station here in Augusta. And I had attended meetings with my son, Al-Anon, Celebrate Recovery, meetings such as that. When I heard the advertisement, I'd never heard of an organization or a support group that was for parents of addicted loved ones. And I began attending meetings about 10 months ago. We were given a book by Michael Speakman, who is the founder of PAL, Parents of Addicted Loved Ones, and the title was 4 Seasons of Recovery for Parents of Alcoholics and Addicts. Again, that was the first time that I'd heard anything that was directed towards parents. My husband and I did about everything that you could possibly do wrong, and I remember thinking back to the time when my children were born and wishing that there was a manual that would teach you how to raise your children, because I absolutely felt like I didn't know what I was doing. And the first meeting we were given this book, and it felt like it was a manual. I began reading it immediately. It speaks about the 4 seasons that parents deal with. Winter being the time that you discover that your son or daughter is an addict. Spring being a time when you actually seek out help for yourself. Education, counseling, that sort of thing. And then the summer season, when your child, son or daughter, realizes that they need recovery and checks themselves into some type of recovery. And then the fall season being a season that the son or daughter may relapse. Of course, that doesn't always happen. But one thing that I liked about the book was that if your child did go through a period where they relapsed, that it wasn't like returning to winter season again, because you had the resources and the education that you needed. And so the book was a tremendous help for me. In the winter season, it speaks about a time when you may have a sudden freeze, something unexpected happens, and you realize that your child has a drug addiction problem. For us, it was another season that's described as a gradual onset. We began to realize that our son was having a problem with alcohol. We would find beer caps in the trash in his bedroom, and it escalated to actually finding ink pens that had been broken apart, and the cylinders would have drug residue. And then it actually became a more serious problem when we saw his health decline. There would be issues with his teeth, weight loss, kidney problems, and eventually just having a house that was very chaotic and out of order, depending on where he was at, if he was coming down off the drugs. Our home became a home of strife. And he was eventually having problems with the law, being arrested for different crimes related to his drug addiction. And those crimes became more and more serious. Eventually he was sentenced to a program called RSAT, which is a 9-month inpatient rehab program. And he began that and had just completed right before I started attending the PAL meetings. And as I said, that was about 10 months ago. immediately we began to implement some of the changes because he was going to be living in our home that were suggested. And when I started attending the meetings initially, my son hated it. I began to learn about things like enabling, codependency, and found that I was very guilty. Enabling is when you have behavior that helps that person continue in their addiction. And then codependency is really a sickness where pretty much everything related to my life was connected to him, trying to save him, his addiction, making sure that his laundry was done, that he was up on time for work, and that kind of thing. So a codependent mama can be a two-edged sword. It's wonderful when you're doing those sorts of things, waking them up, running ahead, trying to save them. And then when we started to make those changes, that was why one of the reasons that Russell just hated it, because we started to have him do those things himself. I would say a turning point for us came one night when we were having, at the meetings we have lessons on family recovery. And one of those was on delayed emotional growth. And I'd never heard that terminology before, but as I recall, we were asked to close our eyes and think about the age that we pictured our child. And if I recall correctly, every parent there said that how they see their child and the age that they saw their child was at the beginning of their drug use. And I absolutely was guilty of that, and had not thought about that if I didn't have confidence in my child, that perhaps he wouldn't have confidence in himself, and that it also made him feel incapable of being an adult. So I went home after that lesson and sat down with my son and apologized for the way that I had treated him, for treating him like a child, and told him that I did recognize that he was a 31-year-old man. After we had the conversation and I apologized to my son, he hugged me and told me that he appreciated me recognizing that he is 31. And we learned that if we treat our children like they're incapable, then they begin to believe that. So I found, as I started to treat my son like a man and not like the person that I pictured him to be, he began to take on more responsibility and to feel more capable himself. You're trying to do the best you can for your child, but you certainly don't want to have a negative effect or make them feel that they're incapable. And so that was a real turning point for us, and I think he would agree with that. We also found out the importance of having contracts. Initially, we tried to do that verbally. It didn't work in our home. We did eventually have a written contract that my husband put together, and it was fairly simple. It had 4 critical items. One was that he maintained sobriety, that he attend 2 meetings a week, and the third was that he have a sponsor. And then the 4th was to be working towards financial, being self-reliant financially. And my husband helped work with a budget with him, and that was really a good time for them to come together too. And he lives in our home, so that was really a critical thing, the written contract. Not just for him, but for us as well, that we're able to come back to that contract if there's a difference of opinion, or just to gauge how we're doing as a family. I would say that PAL has changed our lives. There was a time my husband sat down and we would look at him, and though we had hope, we believed that God was fully able to heal him from this terrible disease, we also deny what we saw in front of us, and his health was declining, and we thought we were going to lose him, so we made funeral arrangements. And that's really where we were right before I started attending PAL. We had discussed whether we were going to have a small funeral and protect his daughter's privacy, or whether we were going to have a large funeral and try to use that as a time of education for other families that were struggling with addiction. And so that was a tough time. I have to say, our life has changed, and it's pretty comical. My son has gone from loudly voicing how much he hated PAL to being an advocate for PAL. He has actually gotten pamphlets and handed those out to counselors, to folks at DRC and SAS, the court-ordered programs that he's completing right now. And I would say that today I'm very hopeful for the future, probably more so than I've ever been for myself, because PAL really is about getting parents healthy. If you have a healthy home, if you're healthy, if you have the education you need, the counseling that you need, and the support that you gain from the other parents who are attending the support groups, then you're going to be able to have a healthier environment for the person who is struggling with addiction. Than I've felt in a long time. I don't feel the need to run ahead. If he were to relapse, I feel like I have the tools that I need, where we would treat it more as a setback rather than in the past being devastated by it. And I'm very thankful for PAL. I'm thankful for Christ Way Christian Church for supporting this wonderful ministry. And I'm also thankful for our facilitator, Nancy Godin, and the relationships that I've built with the other parents that are involved.